Welcome to this series where we are using a Holland playthrough to learn EU5. Now, what this video is going to be a bit different from the previous videos because I'm not actually going to do any playthrough. In fact, we'll probably stay paused most of the time. The reason for that is that I've had a little bit of a breakthrough, which I want to share with you in relation to markets. Now, there's no way I'm going to pretend that this is a tutorial. What I'm going to do is talk about how all the pieces drop together and how I make sense of things. And I want to start by explaining how this actually happened. What I was doing is I found a tutorial by Flying Dutchie on trade and markets. And if you're interested in that video, I've put a link in the video description. And what I was actually doing was I had the video running, but I also had the game active in the background. So as Flying Dutchie was explaining things, I was coming back into the game and actually looking, which I found was very useful. One, because I actually learnt about a couple of menu options which I didn't even know existed. And secondly, by comparing about what he was talking about with what is actually in the game, certain things kind of dropped into place, and then all the pieces suddenly came together, which makes sense. So this is the reason why I'm making this video. If you want to just jump forward to the gameplay, the next part will be out in the future. But if you're learning the game, I would strongly recommend that you watch this video through, because there are a few points which were confusing me, which now make sense. Now, the first thing I want to show you is if we come to the market, what we've got here is these markets themselves. So Holland is part of the Bruges market, but we're not the owner. The owner is actually Flanders, which is in Bruges there. And that little green arrow shows that we are not actually part of the, we don't actually control the market, although we are a major participant in it. Now, the first revelation, let me just see if I can park that cursor. I don't want it flashing up. The first assumption I'd made is that somehow these markets were predefined. And then what you'd have to do is fight to take over them, which you still need to do. But while watching the video, it became apparent that these markets are actually dynamic. And the other assumption I made was the fact that Holland was in the Bruges market, which meant that everything, if I go back to here, everything we own would remain inside of the Bruges market as we expanded. But that's not actually true. And the example I found here is Utrecht. So if I go back to the Holland market, we hover over Utrecht, what you'll see here is the fact that Utrecht is actually part of the Bruges market. And you can see that at the top there, if I keep this here, if we go here, it says market access 84%. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But what you'll see is at the moment, the market attraction, this is the which gives the preference, says that Bruges is the preferred market at the moment, but the Cologne market, which is just here, is not far behind at 50%. Now, if we move down to Amersfoort, what you will see is that this, although this is part of the country of Utrecht, it's actually in the Cologne market. But with a preference of 78.1, which is this one here. And if you see here, if you put it over it gives you the actual market preference. And you see it says market access, market attraction, and market protection. If we come down to here, you can see that the actual market access is 82%. So you can't actually join a market. The game actually calculates your attraction to that market. So for example, what could happen is that, well, when we actually conquer Utrecht and take that over, we'd end up with like Utrecht, with a location in a separate in the Cologne market, which would also mean that we would lose the output from this actual one. So if I go back to here, we click on, just kind of click on the location, you can see at the moment this is just got an RGO, but the fruit output from here would go to the clone market. While we could get some income from that, that won't benefit our overall economy. Now, the other thing that kind of, when I came out here, what you'll see is that the size of markets vary greatly. But you also get like here, so you can see here, the London market only goes up there. So England's got part, if it conquers Edinburgh, it will eventually get control of 2 markets. But then again, if I come across to the pest market here, apologies for all the screens flashing up and down, I'm trying to avoid it. But now the pest market is based over Hungary. If I go back to here, you'll see that the pest market is controlled by Hungary, and it covers the whole of the area here. Now, the kind of second revelation is that if you've got a great big market like this, if you've got a region this is the center of the market, I think if we come here, yeah, pest is the center of the market, but you get over to here. So for example, we come in here. What you'll see is there's a penalty there for transportation for the distance to the market, and you can see that this area here has really got an attraction to the Dubrovnik market, and you can see the way that's come there. Now, another thing that also that got my attention when I was looking at this, as you can see this, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 markets. Now, if I go back to the normal map, you can see that the Golden Horde here has multiple markets. So just see if I can get out of that. Sorry. So the Golden Horde actually has multiple markets. So there's no reason why, if you build your empire out, that you can't actually dominate multiple markets. And then, but the key factor is that, and say for example, you've got a market here, and say we took over the clone market. I know it's a bit silly, but if I go back to the market thing, so say for example, you got the Bruges market and the clone market. Say we expanded out so that we occupied this entire area here. Wish I could turn that off a bit. Between the Bruges and the clone market. Now, we could get all the resources there, but in order for the goods in each of those 2 markets to support our economy, we would then have to trade between the 2 markets. We grew out this way. The kind of decision would have to be is, well, where could we combine this into a single market or keep it as 2 markets? And then, of course, that comes down to where the center of the market is. So if we wanted to control both Bruges and Cologne as a single market, we'd have to have the market center, say, somewhere in the center here. So hopefully that makes sense, guys. And that is the biggest, was a really big revelation for me. Because, as I say, I'd assumed that these markets were static, and that as a country, if you joined a market, that you would that your entire country would always remain within that market. And then, of course, the market size is the distance to market, which then feeds back into control, which is why control is so important. Because, say, for example, again, just to return, if we captured Utrecht and we wanted to bring Amersfoort in, if we built a road, say, from Dordrecht into Amersfoort across the river, we could then draw Amersfoort into the Bruges market. And again, that's going to be quite a big factor, because the other thing that came in, if we come to here, and this is a bit of a hidden mechanic, and this is the reason why I was working through the tutorial, because if we come to here and open up this, now, again, you look at this and you think, oh, well, this Silk Weavers is produced in 6.3. But what you see here is the fact that if you look down to here, it says market access. It says market access represents an easily a location can interact with a market. And what you can see here is this gives a modifier on the amount of input goods that you actually are being produced. And you can see here that because of this modifier, instead of getting 0.7, we actually get only 0.59 output from this market, from this area here. So although it's showing 0.63 here, so maybe we got another modifier. I think there's another modifier working in there. This is another thing that I've got a bit confused. I'll give you an example at the end of the video. that is the first thing I want to talk about the market. Now I want to go back to which is stated constantly, but it's something that I didn't really think about because of my background with management type games. I was looking for a production flow line, and to give that as an example, in Den Haag we produce dyes, and what I was thinking is that the dyes in South Holland would be preferentially given to the Tailors Guild in Den Haag, because you can see these guys are actually doing it. But if you come here, you can see that the dyes are actually bought from the Bruges market. So the actual market here, again, we'll just go back to the market screen. This is like a collective pool of resources. So everything that's produced, whether it's produced by an RGO or a building, is sold to the actual market. And then if any of these buildings actually need a resource, they buy it from the market. Again, this is a bit that was confusing me with respect to trade, that the trade is always between markets, not your country. Even though we set up trade deals, we're actually trading between the two markets, not between the two countries. And I think that's very important to actually understand the way that the trade deals do. And of course, the other thing that's a kind of a little bit of a sting in the tail, if we can park that mouse somewhere, it's really irritating me. Another sting in the tail is that if you import into the Bruges market, those goods flow into the Bruges market. And if we come back to here, and if I lock that, no, not that one there. Wait, go away. So if I actually open up the market, lock it, what you see is that the market actually acts as a collective. So the way you want to think of this, as though what you've got is a distribution center, would probably be the best description for it, where goods flow in, goods flow out for a price. And within that distribution center, you've got a series of traders who are competing to be able to get the best from that market. And you can see at the moment, because the capital is actually they own the location, Flanders is the biggest partner. We got plus 5.33 of the locations, where the Bruges has 27%. Even if I set a trade up, those goods flowing into the county of Flanders still gets first pick. And then what we get is afterwards. So it's very important to get that trade advantage up, and more importantly, to get control of the market. Now, there is a way that we can actually do it. If we come to the economy and go to markets, we can actually create a market by, I don't know if we can actually do it, but then the question is say, for example, sorry about flashing backwards and forwards, if I created a market there, it would be a very small market, and we probably would have to import a lot more goods into the market to fulfill all the demands. And so that's another thing that actually needs to be balanced with respect to what we actually need to do. The other thing I didn't really pay much attention to was these parameters here. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I actually know what they all mean, but what we got here is trade efficiency, production efficiency, again, so the trade advantage of countries in the market determines what they'll be able to get to from their exports fulfilled first. So that returns back to this here. This is trade advantage there, and trade capacity. This represents how much a country can export and import from a market. So this is our actual trade capacity. I've got no idea what that actually is. I think it comes down to when you're actually trading in here. Now, we've actually got our trade automate is actually on automation at the moment. So anyway, and then moving, so we got market maintenance. I think that must come in later in the game because it's zero production. We've got trade capacity. Now, trade capacity is the amount that we can actually trade in the market, but that's got to do with trading. And then we got a trade rating. Again, I don't really know what all these things actually do. Now, what I'm going to show you is if you actually left click on here, what you do is you open up this menu, and so it's a kind of hidden menu which you can get into. You can also get it by coming in directly from there. And quite interesting, when you open this up, it kind of shows the flows of the goods that are actually coming into the market. So you can see we're getting stuff from England. So the market is getting stuff from Ireland, England, right around the world. Now there is a trade range, and I've got no idea where it actually is. But there is a limit on how far you can trade to a market. So for example, you can't say, well, I'm going to trade with a market in the Middle East. There is actually a trade range. Now, what I do want to do is show you this menu here, because it's quite important to understand what it actually is. What this does is it represents all the goods. If I sort by goods balance, I've looked at this screen before, but I didn't really understand it until now. So at the moment we're looking at cloth in the Bruges market. This is plain cloth as opposed to fine cloth. Now, what you see, this little bar here is quite important, because this shows what's currently in storage in the market. Hopefully that makes sense. Then next to it, it actually gives you all the countries which you are supplying. So you can look down here, as you can see here. So against supplying 7.4 units, we're contributing 2.2. And The Hague is 1.53. So this is actually the amount of supply in the market, and this is the amount of demand in the market. Now this is a little bit more abstract, but you can see because it just says needs for burghers, needs for clerics, peasants, etc., etc. And then what you've got here is the actual balances, which I actually sorted on. So you can see at the moment supply exceeds demand. Now, if we go down, I'm trying to look for an example where they're relative. Oh, there we are there. So wool is relatively in balance. Now, I think with wool, if we actually show the wool in the Bruges market, what you see now is that large amounts of it are being imported. So what I've done is I've resorted to the actual search algorithm. So you can see here, so at the moment, supply exceeds demand. So moving across now, what this does is it actually gives you the base price, which is the third line down here. And you can see it's being modified by minus 47.4 due to effective supply. So we got oversupply, over demand, and price stability. And what it's showing is that the price of cloth is degrading down to a target price of 1.57, which is literally half the original base price. Now, if we move down to fine cloth, you can see that at the moment supply can't meet demand. Now, the actual base price is 6, but it says that it's still falling towards a target price of 4.7, but the rate of change is a lot slower. Now, and so that goes to show that the market is constantly dynamically changing. Now, on the side here, it actually gives you the current price, which is 3.65. So this is the target price of 1.57. So what you're really thinking to do is create an oversupply if you've got the buildings in your area which can benefit from the lower prices, because it comes down to added value. So what you're going to be trying to do is manipulate the market, which is obviously going to be a lot easier if you are in control of that market rather than sharing it like it at the moment. There's something else. If we go to Leiden. Now, as far as I know, and don't quote me on this, is that RGO goods don't vary in output with productivity compared to, like I pointed out in Den Haag. What you get is, as I say, if you move over these, you can get little breakdowns of what's actually going on here. And you can also see the market price in here, but you also get this fall in productivity. So even in Den Haag, which is our capital, we still get a fall in productivity with respect to here. That's the reason why you want to control the market. But your RGOs don't suffer from that. An RGO, when it produces a resource, it says output level 1. It always, as far as I can tell, if we come over here, you can see that it actually outputs. But again, this is a little bit of a hidden feature. And you look at it, it says output per level, but this has actually got 2 levels. So you've got to actually move the cursor over the raw material to see that it says total DARS output is 2. Again, so this is again one of these little features that can be quite annoying. I'm going to finish this video with a bit of a question. And I think if we use Leiden, because it's got nothing else in it, and I know I'm getting a bit nerdy now. What we get here is, we come in here, it says profit per level here. Now, as far as I can see, that the only income in this area is from fish. And if we come in here, you can see at the moment it says there's one input. But if we come over to the tax base here, you can see that it says the tax base is 0.32 due to potential tax base. If you come here, it says the potential tax base of the location is the combined profit of its RGO and buildings from selling goods to the market. Remember that. And it says if the burgers are present at the location, that may also increase the potential tax base. But what you don't get is the actual breakdown of this tax base. But as far as I can work out, what the correlation is between the profit level and the tax base, and then below that you actually come down to this area. And now, as a little bit of a side, I know I'm off track completely now, and I apologize, is that you can see the tax base is split, and it gives you the taxes per location. So if we come back up to the economy and go to the balance, when you see this, it gives you the burgers and the the Dell. You can see Leiden gives 0.02. So your actual tax income is split, is literally calculated location by location. So again, if I go to Den Haag, you can see you get the breakdown here again. And it says here potential profit 0.65. But I've actually kind of tried to calculate where the game gets this 10.47 from, but I can't find it. Anyway, that's my problem. I think this is, apologies if I've blown your mind and rambled on too much, but I feel that getting that understanding of how the market works will really help with the gameplay going forward. Anyway, this is where I'm going to leave it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it interesting. Any comments, questions, and more importantly, advice, feel free to chuck it into the video description. And until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.